FIFA has officially done it again. Just when you think this World Cup couldn't get any more dramatic, the darkroom in the sky steps in to execute a multi-million-dollar sporting robbery that has left the entire planet in absolute fury. The ending of the Iran versus Egypt match was supposed to be a legendary moment of pure footballing history. Deep into stoppage time, Iran buried what everyone believed was a spectacular match-winning goal to automatically punch their ticket to the knockout stages. The stadium erupted into pure, unadulterated ecstasy. Grown men were crying, the bench was sprinting onto the pitch, and the raw passion was completely unreal to witness. But right on cue, the VAR booth decided to step in and violently rip the script away. They didn't just check the play, they went on a desperate pixel hunting expedition, micro-analyzing the footage until they found a way to chalk the goal off because an Iranian forward was offside by the literal tip of his toe. It is an absolute disgrace to the soul of the game, and we need to talk about exactly how FIFA weaponized a highly technical rule to break a nation's heart. To understand how utterly insidious this decision was, you have to look at the complete chaos on the pitch while the review was actually happening. When the center referee halted the game, absolutely nobody in the stadium knew what was going on. In fact, everyone from the commentators to the players themselves was completely convinced that VAR was looking at a potential handball inside the box. Instead, the officials completely blindsided the world. They ignored the entire play just to zoom in on a frame, pull out their digital rulers, and catch an attacker offside by a microscopic millimeter. Ripping away a historic, tournament-defining moment over a toe feels less like sporting justice and more like a corporate execution. It completely sucked the oxygen out of the stadium and proved once again that modern technology is systematically destroying the organic joy of football. Now, immediately after the whistle, the internet absolutely exploded with fans screaming, "How on earth is that offside when there is a defender literally standing right behind the goalkeeper on the goal line?" It is a completely valid argument, but FIFA loves to hide behind the absolute letter of the law to justify these robberies. Let's look at the actual physics of this rule. Because the official laws of the game do not say an attacker just has to be behind the last defender. The rule states you cannot be closer to the goal line than the second-to-last opponent. Usually, the goalkeeper is automatically one of those final two players, so nobody thinks twice about it. But in this chaotic sequence, the Egyptian keeper had advanced way off his line. Because the keeper was caught completely out of position, the defender standing on the goal line suddenly became the last opponent. That meant the offside line had to be drawn from the next deepest Egyptian player further up the pitch. VAR drew that line, saw a single millimeter of a shoe, and completely erased Iran's destiny. The sheer devastating impact of this cold, robotic intervention cannot be overstated. We are talking about a squad of players who poured their absolute blood, sweat, and tears into 90 minutes of grueling combat against an elite Egyptian side. When that ball hit the back of the net in the dying seconds of stoppage time, it wasn't just a goal. It was the crowning achievement of a lifetime for these athletes. The emotional whiplash of going from the greatest high of your professional career to absolute crushing despair in the span of a 3-minute review is enough to break any locker room spirit. Look at the images of the fans in the stands. People who spent thousands of dollars to travel across the globe openly weeping because a group of bureaucrats sitting in a climate-controlled room decided that a single millimeter of fabric on an attacker's shoe was enough to invalidate a masterpiece of a transition play. It fundamentally shifts the entire dynamic of how football is consumed. When players are terrified to celebrate a last-second winner because they have to wait for an invisible tribunal to review the footage from 10 different camera angles, the magic of the sport is officially dead. This didn't just alter the scoreboard. It completely broke the tactical momentum and the psychological spirit of the entire Iranian squad, leaving them to stand on the pitch in pure, unadulterated disbelief. It sends a chilling message to every underdog team in this tournament. You can play the perfect game, but the machine will always find a way to switch off your miracle. What makes this entire situation so profoundly toxic is that it completely violates the original spirit and purpose of the offside law. Let's remember why the offside rule was invented in the first place. It was designed to stop attackers from cherry-picking, standing right next to the opponent's goal mouth, waiting for a long ball, and completely ruining the competitive balance of the game. It was meant to punish unfair advantage, not to penalize an athlete for having a slightly larger shoe size than the defender. By applying this technology so ruthlessly, FIFA has completely stripped all human common sense out of the officiating process. Think about the dangerous precedent this sets for the future of the sport. The Egyptian defensive line was completely carved open. Their goalkeeper was caught entirely out of position, wandering around the box in absolute no man's land. By all accounts of footballing merit, Egypt's defense had utterly failed. Yet despite being completely outplayed, outpaced, and caught out of position, they were handed a massive get-out-of-jail-free card because a computer generated a pixelated line from an attacker's big toe. We are officially entering a dark era where terrible defensive mistakes are being actively rewarded by technology, while brilliant high-stakes attacking movements are treated like crimes. When you reduce a beautiful, flowing sport down to a cold game of digital centimeters, nobody wins. It kills the spectacle, frustrates the global audience, and proves that FIFA is more interested in absolute bureaucratic control than protecting the actual entertainment value of the game. Instead of a legendary, guaranteed spot in the round of 32, Iran is now forced to walk away with a bitter, agonizing 1-1 draw, left completely at the mercy of complex group stage mathematics. They did everything right on the night, yet they leave the stadium empty-handed because of a technicality that 99% of casual fans don't even fully understand. But let's settle this right now down in the comments. Did the VAR booth technically make the right call according to the strict letter of the law, or has modern football completely lost its mind by ruining the craziest finish of the World Cup over a toe? Is FIFA over-policing the beautiful game to the point where it's no longer entertainment? I want to see your raw, unfiltered reactions down below. I am reading and replying to every single comment. If you think the spirit of the game should always override microscopic offside lines, make sure to smash that like button, share this video with your football friends, and subscribe to the channel for more raw, unfiltered tournament coverage. And while you're smashing that like button, let's not move on from this conversation too quickly, because this VAR controversy is just the surface layer of a much deeper and far more sinister problem that has been quietly rotting the foundations of world football for years. What happened to Iran tonight is not an isolated incident. It is a symptom of a broken system that FIFA has deliberately built, protected, and weaponized against the very fans who fund this entire circus with their passion, their money, and their loyalty. Let's go back even further and talk about the broader pattern of VAR destroying tournament football, because the data is absolutely damning. Since VAR was officially introduced at the 2018 World Cup in Russia, the number of goals disallowed in knockout stage matches has increased by over 60% compared to the previous two tournaments combined. Think about that number for a single second. More goals are being erased now than ever before in World Cup history, not because players are cheating more, not because attackers are deliberately positioning themselves illegally, but because the technology has become so obsessively precise that it can now hunt down infractions that are completely invisible to the human eye, completely invisible to the defending players, and completely invisible to the attacking players themselves. This is the critical point that the footballing establishment refuses to acknowledge. If a professional defender standing 2 feet away from an attacker cannot detect that the attacker's shoulder is fractionally ahead of his own body, then by what moral or sporting logic should that invisible advantage be punished? The entire foundation of the offside rule is built on the concept of gaining an unfair advantage. But you cannot gain an advantage from a position that nobody on the pitch, nobody in the stadium, and nobody watching on television in real time can even perceive without a freeze frame and a digital ruler. FIFA has essentially created a reality where football is now being officiated by a standard that is physically impossible for any human player to comply with. You cannot consciously control whether your armpit is 1 centimeter ahead of a defender when you are sprinting at full pace in the dying seconds of a World Cup match. Asking professional athletes to manage their body positioning to within a millimeter while simultaneously reading the ball, reading the defensive line, and making split-second decisions is not football anymore. It is a laboratory experiment being conducted on living, breathing human beings in front of a global audience of billions. And this brings us to the absolute hypocrisy at the core of FIFA's entire VAR philosophy. The same organization that proudly markets this World Cup as the greatest celebration of human football on the planet is simultaneously using artificial intelligence and pixel-level analysis to reduce the most emotionally charged moments of that celebration to cold, mechanical calculations. They want you to feel the passion when a striker wheels away in celebration. They want you to buy the replica shirts and the official merchandise. They want you to stream the matches on their official platforms and generate billions in advertising revenue. But the moment a goal is scored, they immediately hand the destiny of that goal to a group of technicians sitting in a bunker with computer screens, stripping every single drop of spontaneous human emotion out of the equation before deciding whether your joy was legally permitted. It is an absolutely staggering contradiction, and it exposes FIFA's true priorities with brutal clarity. They are not protecting the integrity of the game. They are protecting the integrity of their data systems. And those are two completely different things. Now let's talk specifically about the offside line technology being used at this tournament, because most fans have absolutely no idea how deeply flawed the underlying mechanics of this system actually are. FIFA introduced their semi-automated offside technology, which they have proudly branded as a revolutionary breakthrough. The system uses a combination of dedicated cameras placed around the stadium, artificial intelligence algorithms, and a digital skeleton model that maps 29 data points across each player's body. When a potential offside situation occurs, the system automatically generates a three-dimensional model of the attacking player's body at the precise moment the ball is played, and then compares that model against the defensive line. Sounds impressively scientific, right? Here is where it completely falls apart. The cameras capturing this footage are operating at 50 frames per second, but the human body in full athletic motion can move through multiple positions between individual frames. This means the system is not actually capturing the precise moment the ball leaves the passer's foot. It is capturing the closest available frame to that moment and making a calculation based on that approximation. We are talking about potential errors of 20 to 40 milliseconds being used to make decisions that alter the outcome of World Cup matches. The margin by which Iran's attacker was ruled offside tonight was measured in single-digit millimeters. The potential measurement error of the system itself is several times larger than the margin being enforced. FIFA is using a tool with a known margin of error to make binary, irreversible decisions in situations where the alleged infraction falls entirely within that margin of error. In any other scientific or legal context, this would be considered completely inadmissible evidence. A court of law would throw out a case immediately if the measuring instrument being used to establish guilt had a known error range larger than the alleged violation. Yet FIFA is applying this exact standard to the most important sporting competition on earth and calling it justice. And the players are paying the price. Tonight, the Iranian players paid the price. But this is not the first time, and unless something fundamentally changes, it will absolutely not be the last time. Remember the disallowed goal in the 2022 World Cup when Japan faced Spain? Remember the borderline calls that went against Morocco in their historic run? The pattern is undeniable, and it is systematic. The teams with the least political and commercial power in the global football ecosystem consistently find themselves on the wrong end of these microscopic VAR decisions when the stakes are highest. This raises a question that the mainstream football media is absolutely terrified to ask out loud. Is there a bias, whether conscious or algorithmic, built into the way VAR decisions are being selected for review and then enforced? I am not suggesting there is a deliberate conspiracy sitting in a boardroom somewhere, but I am absolutely suggesting that the selective application of VAR scrutiny, the inconsistent thresholds for what triggers a review and how long that review is allowed to continue, creates a system that is vulnerable to unconscious bias at minimum and deliberate manipulation at maximum. And FIFA's complete lack of transparency around the VAR review process makes it impossible to audit, impossible to challenge, and impossible to reform from the outside. The dark room in the sky operates without a jury. There is no defense attorney for Iran. There is no appeals process. There is no opportunity to cross-examine the algorithm. The decision comes down from above, and it is final. In what other high-stakes competitive environment on Earth would we accept that kind of completely opaque, unchallenged authority over outcomes worth hundreds of millions of dollars and the dreams of an entire nation? Not in sport, not in business, not in law, but in football, we are apparently expected to bow our heads and accept it as progress. Let me paint you a picture of what Iran actually loses as a direct result of this single decision, because the consequences extend far beyond tonight's scoreboard. A victory in this match would have sent Iran through to the knockout stages of the World Cup with a group game still to play. That advancement alone would have generated an estimated $40 to $60 million in additional broadcasting revenue, commercial partnerships, and government sporting bonuses for the Iranian Football Federation. It would have given the national team a platform to reach a global audience of over 1 billion people in the round of 32. It would have inspired an entire generation of young Iranian footballers who watched their heroes being robbed on the world stage. The economic and cultural ripple effects of a single disallowed goal in a World Cup group match are genuinely incalculable. And while we are talking about the ripple effects, let's spare a thought for the hundreds of thousands of Iranian fans who made the journey to this tournament. The fans who saved for years, who navigated complex visa applications, who traveled across continents to stand in that stadium and witness their nation compete at the highest level of the sport. Their experience of this tournament has been fundamentally poisoned by a 3-minute VAR review. That is not a small thing. That is a genuine human tragedy playing out on a global sporting stage, and it deserves to be named as exactly that. Now, I want to give you the counter-argument fairly, because intellectual honesty demands it. There are serious, respected voices in the football world who will argue that VAR, for all its faults, has made the game more fair overall. They will point to clear and obvious handballs being correctly punished. They will point to diving and simulation being detected and penalized. They will point to brutal tackles that used to go unpunished in real time but are now being caught and red-carded correctly. And they are not entirely wrong. VAR has genuinely improved officiating in several specific areas of the game. I will acknowledge that completely. But the critical distinction that these VAR defenders consistently fail to draw is the difference between using technology to correct clear, obvious, significant errors and using technology to enforce infractions that exist only in the digital realm and have zero practical impact on the flow of the game. Correcting a misidentified goal scorer is a clear and obvious error. Catching a professional forward who lunged and used his elbow to deliberately punch the ball into the net is a clear and obvious error. These are the situations where technology adds genuine value and genuine fairness to the sport. Hunting down a single toe that is 2 millimeters ahead of a defender's hip at the moment a ball is struck from 30 yards away is not correcting a clear and obvious error. It is manufacturing a violation that had zero practical effect on the defending team's ability to defend, zero practical effect on the goalkeeper's ability to save, and zero practical effect on the outcome of the play in any sporting sense. The Egyptian defenders were beaten. The Egyptian goalkeeper was out of position. Iran scored a brilliant goal. The fact that one attacker's toe was a pixel ahead of a defender's hip, 40 meters from where the ball was struck, is entirely irrelevant to any reasonable sporting analysis of what actually happened on that pitch. The solution is not to abandon technology entirely. The solution is to do what every other major sport has already managed to figure out. Establish a clear, transparent, human-readable threshold for intervention. If the margin of an offside call is less than a defined number of centimeters, the goal stands, because below that threshold, the technology cannot be trusted and the sporting impact is negligible. This is not a radical proposal. This is common sense dressed in sporting clothes. The NFL uses technology to spot the ball, but allows human judgment to govern the margin of error. Cricket uses the snickometer and ball tracking, but applies a specific deviation threshold before overturning decisions. Tennis uses Hawkeye with an explicit uncertainty radius that determines whether a call is overturned. Football is the only major global sport that has handed its highest stakes moments over to a completely automated system with no defined error threshold, no human override capacity at the critical moment, and no minimum margin requirement before a game-changing decision is reversed. That is not advanced officiating. That is technological abdication of responsibility. And the Iran versus Egypt match is simply the latest and most devastating example of the price that real human beings are paying for FIFA's unwillingness to design a system that actually serves the sport rather than the other way around. So where does this leave us? Where does football go from here? Because the truth is that this conversation is going to get louder before it gets quieter. As AI technology becomes more powerful and camera systems become more precise, the margins being measured are only going to shrink further. We are heading toward a future where goals are being disallowed for infractions measured in fractions of a millimeter, where celebration is permanently delayed, where the entire emotional architecture of the sport has been subordinated to a digital verification process that the average fan cannot see, cannot understand, and has absolutely no power to challenge. Unless the football community, the players, the coaches, the supporters, the broadcasters, and yes, even the sponsors who fund this entire machine, unless all of those stakeholders stand up together and demand fundamental reform of how technology is being applied to the game, tonight's robbery of Iran is simply a preview of what is coming for every team, every nation, and every fan who falls in love with this sport. The beautiful game is fighting for its soul right now. It is fighting against the cold precision of machines that do not feel the passion, do not understand the sacrifice, and do not care about the dreams of a young Iranian striker who has spent his entire life working toward a single moment that was erased by a computer algorithm in the time it takes to drink a cup of coffee. That striker deserved better. That team deserved better. Those fans deserve better. And honestly, the entire sport deserves better than what FIFA is currently delivering. So hit the comments right now and tell me exactly what FIFA needs to do to fix this broken system. Should there be a minimum centimeter threshold before an offside can be called? Should human referees have the final override power when the margin is this microscopic? Should FIFA be held financially accountable to nations whose tournament runs are ended by technological errors within the system's own margin of uncertainty? These are not rhetorical questions. These are the questions that the global football community needs to be screaming at FIFA headquarters right now. The window for reform is open, but it will not stay open forever. Smash that like button if you believe VAR needs a complete overhaul before it destroys another miracle. Subscribe to stay with us for every match, every controversy, and every moment of raw football truth at this tournament. I will see you in the next one.